Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's now 3 minutes past the hour. Please do continue to introduce yourself if you have not done so through the chat button. Today, we are privileged to have a great speaker in the house. Let me call him a great speaker. He's one of my mentees, no doubt, but he has gone further to improve himself in this field. And that gives us the opportunity and the rare privilege to have him. I'm talking about Mr. Isaac Oritogun. He's a program officer, researcher, monitoring and evaluation expert, and data analyst at Data Lead Africa, an organization that is based in the Federal Capital Territory, University of Ibadan, Federal Capital Territory, Nigeria, that's Abuja. He's a fellow of the Young African Leadership Initiative yearly, or a fellow of 2019 sets. He emerged the best graduate student of the Master in Development Practice of the University of Ibadan in 2019, same year. Isaac is committed to helping companies move from good to great. But that's why he loves to be part of Images, because we promote greatness. He has forward-thinking growth and result-oriented organization to make sense of data and achieve set goal. The topic of Isaac's presentation today is basics of quantitative data analysis. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you our distinguished guest speaker, Mr. Isaac Oritogun. Isaac, you are welcome. I know perhaps I've not said much. My first question would be to you to tell us briefly as an introduction to your presentation.
Okay.
You didn't start as a data analyst, and I know that very well. You did something related to basic health.
Human anatomy.
Human anatomy, medical science, and you had a master's in development practice.
Yes.
But now you do more of data analytics. Can you just tell us briefly, then from there, launch us to your presentation? You are welcome. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Dad. Yeah, I call Dr. Lally my dad because people say, you know, when we traveled that time, people began to say, oh, you look alike and you sound alike and all that. So, and then he calls me son. So I'm the first son of my set, FS. And then he's my mentor, and he has also helped me in so many ways. There are times that maybe I needed something, and he's always there to just ask, Isaac, how far have you done it? And the rest. So thank you very much. And I'm most pleased to be here. Just to answer Dr. what he asked, I finished from Ibadan 2019. Yeah, so final presentation was in February. After that, I got a role with a consulting firm, that's Data Lead Africa, and what we do majorly is data consultation, trainings basically, and trainings and consultancies. But then initially my role was just as a program officer. So what I was doing was managing projects and everything around that. However, in the course of doing my role as a program officer, I began to take up some other roles as a trainer. And then from then I, picked up interest in core data analysis. And then I get to do a few projects here and there. And thanks to God, I've been able to consult for a few organizations. I've been in a few research projects as well. And it's been a very good, it's been very beautiful. And the experiences have been worthwhile. So that's how I got here. So thank you, everyone. Well, welcome. Okay, so I would just want to say that what we have going for us is a beautiful opportunity to learn And I don't want us to take it for granted. Every time we have opportunities to discuss things that will grow us, I want us to take it very seriously. And again, with the whole advent of COVID and everything that has to do with the pandemic, a lot of things in Nigeria, in the world is changing. So there's what we call the new normal now. And that's because even in the workplace, things are changing and we're moving from the not digital and analog to what we call digital. And then we're moving to a data-driven workspace. So everything we're doing now is all around data. So you notice that data is gradually leaving the school environment to the workspace, to not that it had not been there before now, but then it's just gaining even more and more prominence. So beyond wanting to do this academically, it also means that you can still do this professionally and then get to achieve purpose or enjoy the benefits of doing that. So like I said, we'll be walking through a couple of things. I'll try to make this as hands-on as possible. And just in case we might not be, if we would not be able to cover as much as possible, like I mentioned to Bolu before, when we began to talk about the whole thing, I can volunteer more time. If Bolu and Doctor would allow me, we could probably reschedule to maybe wrap up or try to see how we could do a much more hands-on activity on data analysis and the rest of them. So yeah, so again, sorry, let me scroll. Okay, so the question first I would want to ask is, what is data? We're doing data analysis, we talk about data, everybody says data. So what is data? Can anybody just share what they think data is? Anyone? Okay, Babalola. Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you.
Yes, sir. It's a pleasure meeting you again after Command Secondary School, Kaduna.
Oh, wow. You're in Command?
Yes,
oh,
I was.
Small world. Okay.
Okay, sir. It's a question. Data is it's basically unprocessed information.
Okay.
That is probably the result from an experiment that has not been processed yet, with the potential of giving information upon processing. That's what I can say.
Wow,
generally.
thank you so much. So Ayo just said data is on. Oh, I remember you now. Ayo, it's nice to meet you. Ayo just said data is unprocessed information, which is true. So again, data is a collection of facts, numbers, and then it can be both quantitative and qualitative. We'll be discussing that in details very soon. The quantitative and qualitative aspects of data, and then, okay. And then, like Ayo said, data is raw, it's not organized, it's just fact. And then what we do with data is to organize it and then, try to process it. And then, of course, again, data can be very, very simple, random, until it is organized. So you see most times they use this analogy of a pack of thread and needles just scattered everywhere. And that's what you have as data. So what you do as an analyst or in your analysis, what you're trying to do is to properly arrange this data or this pack of threads or needles, either based on colors or based on sizes and the rest of them. That's where categorization of data comes into play. So again, data is unprocessed and until it is processed by the analyst. All right. Furthermore, when data is now organized or processed, it now comes out as an information. So what it means is you go to the field to collect data, and you say you've collected data like we all do, or we did at some point with our thesis, whether we're doing it in the lab, like I did in my first degree with human anatomy, or like whether you're doing it on the field, like I did with in my MDP program. What it means is we're collecting data, and until that data is analyzed and properly organized, it's not information, because nobody understands what yes and no is until you give us in proper perspective, also in relation to what you are talking about, okay? So that's one thing I would want us to understand. All right. Again, in social research, or generally, we have two major types of research approaches, or research approaches that lead to data analysis. So first, we have the quantitative bit, then we also have the qualitative bit, and then we have the mixed methods research. We're going to delve into that a little deeper now. Okay. Now look at this very carefully. You see that we have quantitative and qualitative. Because we're dealing basically with quantitative today, I'm trying to dive down into what it means with quantitative data. However, let me just speak a little about qualitative, because immediately after my program, when I began to do a lot of data analysis, I began to love qualitative data, because again, with qualitative data analysis, what you get to achieve is just beyond the numbers. You try to collect data that regards to the perception, the experiences, and the challenges of people in the field, or as regards your research theme or your research topic. And so the tools you use in qualitative data analysis are also quite different from the tools you use with quantitative data analysis. So that's one thing I would want us to bear in mind. However, for quantitative data analysis, we have categorical data and continuous data. This we'll see in details as we go on with this class. But then with categorical data, what you have is nominal and ordinal, and then with continuous, you have things like intervals and ratios. So we'll discuss this in details as we go on. Okay, so this is just like an example. Quantitative data is extremely varied in nature. It includes any information that can be captured, but is not numeric in nature. Most times our methods of collecting qualitative data is either through key informant interviews, in-depth interviews, or focus group discussions. Others could be observations and the rest of them. However, for quantitative data, give me a moment, let me just minimize this. Okay, for quantitative data, what you have is, for quantitative data, what you have are measures of either values or counts, and they are mostly numeric, and they can be quantified or verified. So what it means is that with qualitative, you're practically collecting words. So I was saying that, sorry, go back. With qualitative, the kind of data we're collecting with qualitative data are basically words. And I mentioned that we do that with interviews, focus group discussions, in-depth interviews, and the rest of them. While with quantitative, we're collecting counts, we're collecting numbers, we're collecting how many, or like we'll see much later, where we get to use our Likert scale to get level of intensity and the rest, So that's what we do with both. And like I mentioned earlier, there's also what we call the mixed methods research, and that's where you're doing both quantitative and qualitative. So you collected a quantitative data and you're using your qualitative information as just an overlay. That's another thing we do in research. Okay, so, all right, so now, since we're discussing majorly quantitative data in this class, what then is quantitative data? So it's just a process of collecting and analyzing numerical data. And then at the end of the day, what we're trying to do with the numerical data we've collected is to do patterns, averages, and then we're trying to find causal relationships and the rest. And then sometimes we do descriptives just to find percentages and the rest of them. For instance, a quantitative data could be something as simple as using COVID-19 as an example. So how many persons in Nigeria have received the COVID-19 vaccine, for instance? And then we say, oh, for instance, we say 20% of people in Nigeria have received the COVID-19. Then we begin to drill a little deeper and say, okay, let's disaggregate this number by geopolitical zones. And you find out that it's easy to now say, okay, 50% of people in the north, in the northeast, 20% in the south, and the rest of them. And then we now say, oh, so how many people do not want to receive the COVID-19 vaccine? Then we come up with another number that says, for instance, 20% or 30%. Now that's basically quantitative. However, in qualitative, what you're doing is you're collecting their perception. So beyond just not receiving the COVID-19 vaccine, we're now asking, okay, why don't you want to receive the COVID-19 vaccine? And then you hear people give experiences or give reasons or give problems and the rest of them. So you see that with quantitative data, what we're collecting basically is just numbers, So, for instance, like you see here, it says quantitative research collects information from existing and potential customers using sampling methods. So you're doing online surveys, online polls, questionnaires, and then, of course, your results in quantitative data is always in numerical forms. All right, and then a few characteristics of quantitative research, which is where what we're dealing with majorly. Number one is that it's used in structured research instruments. So for example, you go to the field with your questionnaire. What it means to be structured is the fact that you're not going beyond what you have collected. You're going strictly by what you have collected, and that's all. So there's no opportunity to probe, or there's no reason to probe. For instance, you're asking, have you received the COVID-19 jab? Yes or no? There's no reason to say, maybe try to explain a few things. It's structured. It's a yes or no, or maybe, or just give us reasons why, as against qualitative, which is quite unstructured. And then also results are based on larger sample size that are representative of the population. And okay, yeah, for quantitative, what we do is to do some form of sample size calculations. There are different formulas for sample size calculations. I think what we're most conversant with is the Cochrane sample size calculation, but there are different other types. So what you do with quantitative is you have a sample size, and then you're going based on your sample size. Of course, as against qualitative, that what you're looking out for is basically not necessarily how many you have collected, but saturation, which is the basic difference between quantitative and qualitative as well. Okay, and then of course, with quantitative, what it means is you have your ability to replicate data or replicate the study. Most of us, or all of us that have done researches, what happens most times is that you just pick a methodology, which is, if it's quantitative, and if you've done a research in Kano, for instance, it means that if it's a quantitative research, one major characteristic it must have it is replicability. So you can, with little or no major changes, replicate that same study in a Kaduna or a Yobe, as long as you have basically the same characteristics of respondents. And then, of course, with quantitative as well, the researcher has a clearly defined research question and to which he wants to answer the objectives as it should be. Okay, so other characteristics of your quantitative research is that all aspects of the study are carefully designed before the data is collected. And then, like we mentioned earlier, the data is always in form of numbers, statistics, and then it's always arranged in charts, figures, which we'll see as we go. And it's non-textual, as against qualitative, which is basically textual. And then of course, with quantitative, the project can be generalized, which was what we spoke about when we mentioned replicability. And then the researcher uses tools as questionnaires or computer softwares to collect the numerical data, which will be exposed to also as we continue to go on. Okay, so as a form of, still introduction, we know that data is described as the new oil. And just like crude, it is not valuable until it is refined. So it means that your data, until it is refined, does not necessarily make sense to you. And so what we do with data is to analyze it and to try to make sense out of what we have collected. So let's go a little deeper and mention data collection plan. Okay, so as much as possible, I want this to be a little hands-on. So if possible, if you can go with me as we discuss, such that if you have any challenge, you can always call me back. I would really appreciate that, because we'll be talking basically data collection plan using Kobo Collect mainly. And then after that, we'll now be discussing just basics of Excel and SPSS. Some of the things we know, and then some others we'll just brush around. So data collection, now without a systemic way to start and keep data clean, it's possible to have bad data. So if you don't have, so if you don't have a method or a system of collecting data, you would not be able to collect clean data, especially in quantitative, where we mentioned that it is meant to be structured. Okay, so what happens most times before we step out to the field, either to collect data on a particular subject, whether it's academic or non-academic, possibly you're doing a monitoring and evaluation, or you're just collecting data for an academic research, it's very important to have your data collection plan, as much as it's important to also have your data analysis plan and also your research plan. So what those plans, what your data collection plan mainly is just a detailed document. It helps you explain what exact steps are you following in trying to gather the data. Now, data collection plan, especially for us, those of us in the non-profit, is that it just helps you know what to focus on, because again, you probably will be using data enumerators to go to the field to collect this data. So if you have your properly designed data collection plan, what it means is that you're telling your enumerators, you could use that in training your enumerators, and you're saying this and this is what we're going to do. We're doing a quantitative kind of research. This is our inclusion criteria. These are the people we're looking out for. These are the people that we're not looking out for, and the rest of them. So it's important to have a plan that says, this is what we're going out for in our data collection process, okay? So again, a few things we must consider in designing our data collection plan is, number one, the accuracy of the data. So data accuracy. So what level of precision are we looking out for in collecting data? And then validity. How well will this data instrument that we have designed be able to measure what we're looking out for? You see this a lot with projects that has to do with monitoring and evaluation. And that's where you hear things around the log frame and the rest of them. Because again, with your logical framework, you have designed indicators that you're supposed to look out for in trying to collect your data. So you're asking yourself, if my indicator is percentage of people who have contracted COVID-19 between February and October, I should be asking questions that relate to that, and the rest of them. So another thing we're talking about is the data validity. How valid is your data collection? How valid would it be? Okay, and then reliability. Now, to what extent is your data collection stable and consistent? So in trying to collect data, you're sure that you're not altering your tool in the middle of your data collection process. You're not altering your sample inclusion criteria. Those are the people you're collecting data from, and the rest of them. It's reliable, and you're able to collect this data from the right set of people that you have planned to from the beginning. And then finally, the timeliness. So assessing the needed information in time. Again, everything we do in data collection or in research is always time bound. So you're not trying to collect data for a very long time. Only if you're doing some kind of longitudinal studies, that means that you're collecting data over a long period of time. But then it's important that you understand your timeliness in collecting data. In just to also mention this, I know we're all conversant with what we call piloting, both even in doing your simple samples with monitoring and evaluation and the rest, or even doing an extensive kind of study, whether an academic research or the rest. What we do in piloting is to test things like this. So you're testing what's the validity of my, what will be the validity of my tool, you know, how valid it is, how reliable it is. And that's why we do piloting. And that's why it's important that we do some form of piloting in trying to do our data collection. So I just chip that in so we can be able to understand how important it is. Okay, so in your data collection plan, there are very few things you would want to take note of. Number one, what is your source of data? And in sourcing data, there are primary sources of data and then there are secondary sources of data. Primary sources of data are basically this data you collect, like you collect on your own as a researcher or as a data collector. So for instance, let's use this COVID-19 scenario, and that's what we'll keep using. So say, for instance, I'm in Abuja and I want to conduct a study on the incidence of COVID-19 in Abuja, using Abuja as a case study for Nigeria, for instance. That's a case study kind of research. My primary source of data would mean those persons that I have shared my interview, my questionnaires to, and are able to collect that data. I mean, those people I collected data from. While my secondary source of data will just be all those other sources of data that I used that are not primarily from me. So any data source from NCDC, any data source from the Federal Ministry of Health, any data source from other polls that were not mainly collected from me, those are my secondary source of data. So you would notice that in our researches, we're able to clearly define that, oh yes, I'll be doing a mix of primary and secondary data. My secondary data is mainly from literatures and the rest of them, while my primary source of data are the data or the data I get from the field directly. So that is one thing we must take note of in our data collection plan. Secondly, we must also be able to explain what type of data are we collecting. Is it quantitative or qualitative? And again, in this kind of situation, you see people do some form of mixed studies. Especially for us in the development space, it's important that we're able to clearly define not just how many, or not just how many people have benefited from a particular project, for instance, but what are those other salient points that cannot be collected quantitatively. And that's where qualitative data comes into play, where you're able to say, okay, beyond just the options I gave you in my questionnaire, what are those challenges you face? How have you been able to overcome some of these challenges? You know, and the rest of them. You know, with that, you see the uniqueness of qualitative data and how interesting it is to collect qualitative data beyond just your quantitative data. All right, furthermore, you want to also understand what's the frequency of your data collection. So you want to know, oh, is it a kind of data I'm collecting over just a period of time? I'm collecting this data regularly, quarterly, or monthly, or even annually, you know. So that's another thing we must be able to clearly define in our data collection plan. And also, what will be your instrument of data collection? Like we mentioned, for quantitative, you're doing basically questionnaires. It might be paper-based, it might be online. For sustainable people like us, we know would prefer to just do an online kind of data collection, you know, or others would want to do a paper-based. Then if it's a qualitative study, you're now doing interviews or focus group discussion, interview guides, focus group discussion guides, and the rest of them. Then finally, you want to ask yourself now that I've collected this data, what will be my method of data analysis? Now, there are different methods of data analysis depending on the kind of data you collect. For quantitative data, you might want to do like you might want to just do descriptives, correlation, and the rest of them. Or for qualitative, you want to do maybe the thematic analysis, descriptive analysis, narrative analysis, as the case may be. So practically, this is what your data collection plan looks like. And it has all of these subs as things you must be able to exhaustively answer before you hit the field to begin to collect data on whatever it is, whether it's your thesis, or you're trying to monitor a project, or you're just trying to take out or carry out a simple survey, and the rest of them, okay? Okay, so please, like I said, if at any point you need some form of clarifications, you can always just beckon and then we'll discuss. Okay, thank you. All right, going forward, let's talk a little about instrument development, which, like I said, having defined your research or your survey, you now want to develop an instrument to help you collect data, okay? So now, one of the most important, if not the most important part of your data collection process is the creation of questions that would help measure your intended opinion or experience and behavior. That thing you want to look out for. One key thing you want to do first is to design a tool or ask the right questions. So again, it's not enough to just, you just say, oh, I'm going to the field. You have sampled your maybe high response or low response. Another thing you want to do is to be able to ask the right set of questions, and then your time will be wasted if you just go to the field and you don't ask the right set of questions. I have had a couple of researches canceled because you are not asking the right questions. And most times it just results to waste of time and waste of energy and waste of money as well. So it's important that you take time in designing your tool so you could go to the field and ask the right set of questions, okay? So what then are the best practices for creating an effective survey instrument? So let's consider this together. Number one, you must be clear on your study objectives. And for this, I am not just particular about those in the academia. Also those of us in the development space, which I believe most of us are, we must be able to properly define our study objectives, especially for those of us in maybe those in monitoring and evaluation and the rest of them. You know that if you do not clearly define your objectives, then if you do not even understand your objectives, then you're just heading for the rock. So you must be able to be clear. You must be clear on your objectives before you begin to go in to collect data. So you must have a clear idea of what your study is about, and then the hypothesis and then the intended outcome as well before embarking on the survey design. Then you also need to be determined on maybe if it's a business study or business survey you want to do and the rest. So number one, you must be able to answer what is the purpose of the survey or the research, or what are we also trying to measure? In this COVID-19 case, we know that, we want to measure perception, or we want to measure occurrences or cases. So those are different things. If you're measuring perception, for instance, you're looking at a qualitative kind of study, while if you are measuring occurrences that would end up in numbers and the rest of them, you're doing a quantitative kind of study. So those are some of the things you must be able to clearly understand. Then another thing is how many questions. Again, as much as possible, you want to make your questions, pinpoint questions, so that people don't just eventually waste their time. Time is of the essence. So if you're sharing an online questionnaire, for instance, you want to just ask those questions and you're not duplicating questions. So how many questions do you intend to include? Especially because, again, right, our perception or our attention span, is gradually reducing. That's what scientists will tell you. Our attention span is reducing. So it's important that you don't ask very long questions. For instance, I have seen a lot of online questionnaires, and most times when I just see that it's too long, I just ignore it and I move on. So it's important that we know the right set of questions asked. And also, what type of rating scale do we want to use? This is basically for quantitative. What kind of rating scale do we want to use? Sometimes we might want to use just yes or no. Other times we want to do some form of Likert scale that gives a gradation of perception and the rest of them. So, or you want to do, say, good, fair, poor, very good, excellent, and the rest of them. And also, how will we know that the surveyor worked? So what makes the data we are collecting actionable? This is like looking at the end result and being sure that what I'm trying to get is what I need, and the rest of them, okay? All right, so now we're going to go into designing our tools and then basically just talk about our questionnaire quickly. So this is a case study I have here, E-extension identification questionnaire. So the study aims to identify, so number one thing, you must have your title and then your preamble. So the study aims to identify E-extension services and the challenges of deploying innovative solutions, leveraging on ICT for extension work. This data collected is confidential, so you must be able to give this information to whoever that is collecting, whoever you intend to collect your data from, that's your study participants. And then you must be able to assure them of confidentiality, depending also on the nature of the study. There are some studies that are not necessarily so confidential, or they don't need some level of confidentiality. However, there are others, maybe like an HIV/AIDS study or health-based study generally, that confidentiality is very important. So you must assure your participants of confidentiality. And then you're able to now say, okay, this is confidential. And then you also get their permission to continue your study. So you must get some level of, yes, I intend to be part of this study, or no, I do not intend to be part of this study. And we know by now that we must, or we cannot force people beyond their wills. So if someone says no, most times you see those kind of online tools that say, okay, if you just say no, it leads you to the end. Thank you for participating, and the rest of them. So that happens across board. So confidentiality is very important, as well as collecting the permissions of your intended study participants. Okay, and so these are just a few things I would want us to take note of. This is for paper-based study questions. So okay, so let's look at this. This is like a typical paper-based questionnaire that we probably have either worked on or we've seen, where we say, okay, this is a survey on employee training and development practices in public and private hospitals. And then you have a brief on the study and every other thing you need to know, the purpose of the study, confidentiality. There should also be a clause that says, do you intend to be part of this study, yes or no? And then the person ticks, and then you go on. So the first section to this is your demographic profile. Again, especially for those of us that have had to do some form of academic activity or research, we know that the first thing is either demographic or social demographic. And then in that place, you're trying to get data on gender, age, location, educational qualification, also depending on the kind of study you're doing. Maybe other kind of questions here could be years of experience and the rest of them. Okay, and then so again, another thing you want to pay attention to in trying to design your questionnaires is to use filter questions. So filter questions just make it possible for respondents to be able to bypass questions that are not relevant to them. So what you have with filter questions in paper-based is what we call skip patterns when you're using a data collection tool that is either web-based or app-based. You see things called skip patterns. We'll see that as we go on in this class. Okay, so just a gentle reminder again, if you have any questions or you need any point for clarification, you can always call, so we discuss it together. So for example, if you're asking your respondents if they have used a product and there are other questions based on that product, and they say, okay, they've not used it, they can always skip to the next set of questions that does not apply to them. So that's where we hear things like not applicable and the rest of them. Also, you hear something, there's this very popular saying, keep it short and simple, KISS, right? So your questions, especially because if they're online based, it should be short. It mustn't be excessively long, so people don't just get tired. And just remember, what you're looking out for is to collect data as accurate as possible. So it means that you must be able to keep it short such that your participants, your study participants or your respondents are not fatigued while trying to give answer to your questions. Okay. And also you must be able to determine your rating scale. Now, this was what I was talking about when I was mentioning Likert scale. You know, skills are very important. And your scale in your study must be consistent, especially in quantitative study. So skills are critical to the success of your research, and well-designed skills are easy to understand. And then they help to accurately represent the respondent's attitude or preference or opinion. Like this sample we have here, you see that we're using a scale that goes from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. This is what we just call a Likert scale. It just gives us a range of preferences in trying to answer our research questions. Okay, so what are the different types of rating skills? So you have graphic rating skills. You could check this up online, Likert scale, where the respondents can select a particular option depending on the scale that depicts a particular rating. So express your level of satisfaction, for instance. You see something like highly dissatisfied, dissatisfied, neutral, satisfied, or highly satisfied. You know, you also have numerical ratings. So aside graphic ratings, which is more like your Likert scale, you have your numerical ratings where you say 1 is totally satisfied and then 5 is totally dissatisfied. So anything in between, just grades. And then you can say, okay, 1 is dissatisfied, 5 is satisfied, depending on how you want to put it. But what's most important, like we would have also noticed in our processes of trying to respond to these kind of questions, is that it must be consistent. Consistency is very, very important. If not, what happens is, if, for instance, in some of your questions, 1 is satisfied like you have here, and 5 is dissatisfied, while in some subsequent questions, 5 is now satisfied and then 1 is dissatisfied, you just, you know, you confuse the respondents or the study participants, and then they might not be able to accurately answer the questions like they would want to. Okay, so that's also important. All right, now again, other types of rating skills, you see what we call descriptive ratings. This is not used very well, but then this just helps to give a visual representation of, beyond just putting numbers and a Likert scale, it also gives you like an explanation of what the numbers mean. For instance, here, how to improve customer satisfaction. Number 1 says set up and use communities. 5 says offer products. And sorry, 7 says offer product training and customer support and the rest of them. So you see that people get to choose whichever they want to. as the case may be. So most times a numerical value, numerical values, like we mentioned earlier, is not always related to the option. So sometimes not just putting number, you also want to add a description so that the respondents or the participants are able to go beyond just 1, 2, 3 to also, pinpoint on why they are picking that number. Okay, so now we're going into using ODK. Like I said, I want to make this hands-on, and I wish that some of us are able to either access our phones or laptops while this goes on, so that it makes it easy for us to relate to what we're doing. So for the purpose of this part of this, we'll first be talking about creating survey forms or building our forms on the cloud. And then we'd also then find a way of uploading our forms to a server. And then after that, we would load our ODK either on a mobile device. That's what we're doing. Or you would notice as we go on that most times people just share their ODK link for people to fill, while others, for me, most times I prefer to use the mobile device. There's the ODK Collect app, which is on Android devices and even on iOS as well, where it's easy to just upload your document, your questionnaire on that app, and then you can easily have maybe for a monitoring and evaluation kind of study where you are using a lot of data enumerators, you can just give all of them the link. They all have the tool or they have the app on their phones, and then they can just go to the field to collect data. Then we'll now talk about uploading these data to the server, and then also downloading the exports or the collected data. So this is the first part of what we're going to talk. We're done with the introduction. Now we want to discuss everything around data collection using ODK. Then we'll just brush up on Excel and SPSS, okay? So let's go. Now, one thing which is the basic objective of why we're here is to help us understand and have some form of practical knowledge required for mobile data collection system using ODK specifically. So there are 3 parts to ODK, the ODK building part, the collecting part, and then the aggregating part. So what's the benefit? Now, for those of us that would want to download the tool, would notice that this is the major logo on the tool of the app. It's called ODK. It's called ODK Collect, and then this is the major logo of the tool, okay? So number 1 is ODK is free and it's an easy to use tool. It runs on Android devices. I think it also has an iOS format. It is downloadable from Google Play Store. And then some of the benefits is that it helps you collect real-time data. It's a faster form of collecting data. It's accurate. It's also instant, gives you feedback immediately. And then you could also insert data quality checks as well. Just to digress a little and to give us an example, at some point when we're doing our final thesis, then it wasn't very popular using online or ODK tools. And then we had all gone to the field with the aim of doing some form of paper data collection, and we're all excited. But, in, I think, a few days to our data collection process, our supervisor, Dr. Ayo, Dr. Lale actually suggested if we're open to using an online or an app for collecting data, which me and my colleagues then, some of us just were against it. And that was because, of course, change is rare. Change is not very easy to go with. So we all declined and we went ahead with collecting our paper, collecting our data with our papers. Now, the major challenging thing after collecting that data, because we did almost 463 respondents, more than 450 respondents. The biggest challenge for us in that was now ability to move that paper-based, those information we've collected on paper to SPSS, and it took a lot of time. And I can remember that almost 2 or 3 times, everything I had typed in on SPSS got wiped out. And you know, but then if we were using an ODK, for instance, what it means is that we're just downloading what we have collected in Excel format, and we're uploading our Excel in on SPSS, and that's very, very easy. So what it means is it's more accurate to collect your data using some of these apps, ODK specifically, and it's easy. You're not, you know, the chances of making errors is also very less. Okay, so let's do this together, right? Let me instead of just showing us, let's go online and let me show you what it looks like. Okay, so most times you can do this, but okay, so what you do most times is you could fill any of an ODK form online, for instance, and then what you just need to do is copy the link of what you have collected or the form you have filled on ODK into or just copy the link and then place it on your ODK app online. So that's one thing you can easily use. So this is ODK. But then for me, I do Kobo Collect. So I will show you what Kobo Collect looks like and how it works. Sorry, my mouse is dragging. Okay, so now Kobo Collect is also online based. You can see that I have an account with Kobo Collect, my name and my password, and then I can log in at any point. Okay, so for those of us that want to do this, let me show us. You could just go on, just click on Kobo. This is the link, kobo.humanitarianresponse.info, and you can have your account on that Kobo. Okay, so when you have your account on Kobo and you want to design your tool, like for instance, you can see here in August, we designed a tool for a Gambian-based NGO on female genital mutilation. And that's the name, Gamcotrap FGM survey. And they all went to the field to collect data. I'm going to open this and show us. But then after doing this on Kobo, you just click on new, and then you can choose to build from scratch or design your tool on XLS or use a template and the rest. I choose to build from scratch, for instance, and I'm saying my project name is, sorry, excuse me. Yeah, my project name is, let's say, incidents of COVID-19 in Nigeria, a case study of the FCT or case study of the FCT, for instance, right? And then you have this as your study. You could put a short description, and then with Kobo Collect, you could choose your sector. So let's say we're doing health, and then we're doing Nigeria. I hope there's Nigeria. Okay, so.
Hello, Isaac. Hello, Isaac. Yes. We can't see your screen. We can't see your screen for demonstration. You may need to close and then show again. Thank you.
Okay. Let me just close that now. All right. Sorry about that. I'm sorry. All right. So let me share my whole screen now. Hello. Can we see the screen now?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that.
Yes, we can see. Yes.
Sorry about that. So, like I was saying earlier, I use most times Kobo. I use Kobo, and then this is the link, kobo.humanitarianresponse.info, and that's because it's free to use, and it's free and it's online based. So, I use this mostly to design the tool, and I was using this as an example of a survey we designed. I designed in August, but I'll open this and show us much later. But like I was saying, first thing you can do is to log in. For instance, this is my personal settings. This is my personal account on Kobo, and then I can always change the settings. You can see that here. So I have this as my account. So if I want to design any tool whatsoever, I just come to new. I could build from scratch. I could upload an XLS form. Time might not permit us to discuss on how to do this on XLS, but we know that XLS is like an Excel format. What you do is you build your forms or your tool, your data collection tool on Excel, and then everything you now need to do is just to move. What you need to do is now to move it directly to Kobo, and then it's easy for you to use at that point, okay? So when we click on build from scratch, like I'd already started explaining, so let's say incidents, or, okay, sorry, it gave me, okay, yes. This was what I was typing before I tried to share the screen. So you can give a description, and then we're saying this is in the health sector, and then this is in Nigeria. Okay, Nigeria, and then we create a project. So this is the first page you get when you want to build your tool on, what's the name, on Kobo. You know, so with this, we can now begin to add questions. So you see, so let's add a question. When you add a question, you have the options of, you're either selecting one, which is what you have when you're asking a kind of question that is. So let me just use this first question as an example before I show you the one I had built earlier. So for instance, let's say we want to know what gender you are. So we're saying you're either male, right? Or you're female, or you prefer not to say. I think that's one thing that is very popular now. Okay, so you see that in this place, this is a question. You can choose to duplicate this question. For instance, we choose to duplicate the question. You can choose the settings. So remember when I was mentioning skip logic or logic patterns earlier, where I said that you can choose to not ask, maybe just ask a particular question. For instance, if you're answering questions on a particular product, say, okay, you're asking gender specific questions. Are you male or female? And then the person says, I am male. You know that you must have put in a few questions that regards to male, but then if the person says, I am female, for instance, you would want to skip and go to the questions that just concerns the person alone as a male or as a female, the case may be. So you have that here as your skip logic. I would show us that practically in the study we have designed, you know, and then after that, designing this, what you want to do is just to save. So if you save this, you would notice that you want to, if you can preview your form. Excuse me, you can preview your form, and what you can also have is you can deploy this project. If you're deploying this project, it means that you're creating a link for the project, and then you can copy the link and then share it with anybody who wants to fill your questionnaire. So let's go to one of the deployed questions that we have here. Okay, sorry, the form. Okay. Okay. So this was a study that we had done. Okay, so this was a study we had designed that had to do with different regions in the Gambia on female genital mutilation, and they all about 400 plus participants were part of the study. So you can see here that we had, okay, this is to edit it. I'm coming. I'm trying to open the results of the study. Okay. So with this now, we have, you can see that for this study, 402 participants filled it. And then it happened between, the last submission was on August 11th and it was modified on August 7th. So you see that with this method of data collection, you have ease and you can easily follow through what you are collecting. So let's see the tool together. Let's see the tool together. Now, this is just to preview the form, okay? So you can see that GAMCO-TRAP FGM survey, and we're conducting the research on female genital mutilation or cutting in selected regions in the Gambia. We want to know what your perception is. The survey should only take about 5 minutes, and your response is completely anonymous. So remember what I said about consent. So do you intend to? So you say yes, and then we continue. So we enter dates, enter time, and then this is how it appears. So let me show us what I mentioned about skip patterns. Okay, so these were the categories of our respondents in that study: traditional cutters, ex-cutters, regional or community-based facilitators, girls and women who have been caught, and then mothers of girls who have been caught. Now, this is not the end of the study. But then if you select that you're a traditional cutter, for instance, you see that a whole bunch of questions opens up for you by the objective. So we want to understand their knowledge. So you see something like knowledge. Another thing we also wanted to understand was, another thing we wanted to note, give me a moment of it. Okay, so again, let me just mention something here. You see that there are skip patterns as these questions go. For instance, this question 208 said, do you think that female circumcision should be continued or should it be stopped in the Gambia? So you see options: continue, stop, or I don't know. So anybody that click continue, we ask other questions. Why do you think it should be continued? If you had click stop, we ask you other question. Why do you think it should be stopped? So those are what I mean by skip patterns. And then this is easily done with an online-based or a web-based tool for data collection. Okay, so this was the form. Another thing I wanted us to see here is data. So remember when I said that you're not going through the stress of having to type your responses like you would have done if you used paper to collect your data. So with this alone, I can do a quick report as to the kind of data I've collected. So this first part is the table. It shows me the number of persons that have filled the tool, and it's easy for me to monitor it, even though I wasn't there while they were collecting the data. And then also you see a quick report as to the kind of data, sorry, it's loading, the kind of data that was collected. Okay, so amongst all of them, 402 persons said yes, they were going to continue collecting the data. Age of respondents, most of them were between 19 to 28 years old. And it also gives us that in percentages as well, okay? And then most of our respondents were from Woolly East, which was one of the districts in our study. We also have most of them from, well, a wide range of communities, and then ethnicities. Most of them were Mandikas, and then most of our study respondents were married. Very few of them were divorced. Again, right, you can see from here, okay, most of them do not have any form of education, and then only about 1.74% of them had higher form of education. What we have seen from here is that You can as well download this and use it to form some form of your preliminary findings, you know. So you see, you can download this in whatever format you want to, and then use it for your preliminary findings. So I could choose to export and then download this, even though this will come in some form of an Excel format, you know. And so this is generally what we mean when we say doing an online based. And at the end of the day, what they used was they used the ODK Collect tool. I sent the link of this of the toolbox to them. They put it on their tool, and then they went ahead to collect the data. Okay, so let's go back to our slide, and then okay, and then we try to explain that. So you can now see that this is how it is on ODK. This is the ODK Collect tool, but I was using the Kobo, and it's basically the same thing. I prefer to use Kobo because it's free as compared to ODK that you probably would have to pay, you know, for some form of subscription, but it's basically the same thing. So ODK Build is like a form designer. It's a drag and drop interface like we saw. It's used to just design tools, and for the purpose of this training, we'll use it to show you how to go about it. So a few things you must note, like we saw earlier in the description, you'd see you have your project title, you have your menu bar, you also have your accounts, and then whatever question you want to add, you can add it down there, text, numeric. You can also add location, you can add dates, as the case may be, okay? So again, using that, you can, like we saw with those questions, your name, your age, you can make it text-based, you can make it numeric, you can put your locations, and then you can also choose to add pictures and all that. And then people use this also to monitor on the field. Okay, so when you saved your form, you can now say, okay, aggregate or publish to X. In the format we saw, you're publishing to XLS form or however you want to. Okay, beautiful. Now, that's the first part, you're building. The next part you want to do is to aggregate. Remember this that I showed you in our tool. So you just log in. Okay, so this is the tool. Remember, okay, so there are two tools that I used to explain. This is ODK and this is Kobo. This was what I used to demonstrate. So with the new, which we have here, permit me to just be toggling back and forth. As long as you can see my screen, you see the new here, and then you see the other options here and here as well. You know, so that's one thing. That's one thing you can take note of. You know, so you have your new here, you can create new forms. You can create new forms, then you have the number of forms you've deployed or number of forms you've activated or deactivated, and then incomplete forms. So this is the first interface you meet on your Kobo toolbox. All right, so going forward, we also have, okay, like we also saw when I was demonstrating that you can easily say add questions. Like we had that, you have this plus button here. You have, okay, so where's that form we just created? Okay, sorry, this. Let's edit this. So you have this plus button here. If you can see my screen, where you can just add more questions depending on what you want to add. So that's what this is. And then you can save here, you can add questions, and then you can choose the format of the questions. Like we mentioned earlier, the different formats of questions you can add optional questions, select many, text, numbers, decimals, dates. These are the range of questions you can ask when you are using your online-based tool, okay? Yes. All right, let's continue. Sorry, this is not it. Okay, so wow. Then you choose to deploy. Remember when we deployed our tool? So you, after doing or adding your question, you deploy. And then after that, you can now download and create your report as the case may be. So you could use support forms and questionnaires into sequence. You can do geotagging, photos, videos. This happens a lot when you're sending enumerators into the field. You want to be sure that those guys are on the field and they are not just somewhere under the tree cooking data, right? So you want to do some form of geotagging and all of that. That's also possible with Kobo Collect, okay? Sorry. Okay. All right, so now, having done that, what you now want to do is either to collect your data with just a link, or you want to use a proper Android application to collect your data, which is where the ODK Collect mobile app comes to play. So you can always, this is the icon for ODK Collect. You can always use it to collect data. So this is how it looks. This is the icon, and then this is how it looks, okay? So you see things like this. Those of us that have downloaded the app, we would see that this is like a landing page on the app. With this, you can fill blank forms, you can edit a form, you can send a form from your phone to the central database, you can just save forms without sending, download a new form, or delete an old form. So what happens, we'll see how it goes, okay? So again, after you have designed your tool on Kobo or ODK like we did, the first thing you want to do is to go to your main menu, click on General Settings, and then click on Server. So again, I know that we're limited with time and we might not be able to do this practically, but like I mentioned earlier, we can always discuss if there are challenges, especially for those of us that are mentees on the program. I would ask that we have a plan where maybe Golaga can help us with that, with this, such that if we have any challenge in trying to work around data collection in this as part of our program, you can always call and then we'll clarify it. But then we're constrained with time. I think we'll have to wrap up like 4 or 5. So we might not be able to go deep, but just these are the steps that we can go about trying to move our tool that we've created from the web to the application. So you go to General Settings, then from there you can select your server. So it's just like choosing what you want the application to focus on. So every tool would have a specific server. So this is the URL of the tool, KC Kobo Toolbox /username, and then we enter our username and enter our password. I also had that, or I have that here for mine. Let me try to show you that. So for instance, in my own case, if I want to, if I want to deploy a tool, I could just come to my account settings and then select the username and everything I need from here based on my password. And then I just copy it and put it on my own tool, just like this as well. So what it means is that anybody that has that username and password will be able to access the tool I designed online, and then it's easy for them to use that tool in filling their questionnaire. But then this ODK Collect is just the mobile application that makes it easy for us to collect tools online. So again, you go to fill blank forms, you see your project form, and then you're able to, these are just some of the things you can pay attention to where your main question is bolding, and then your hints are in italics. Those you can get when you're designing your tool, and then, of course, if you're doing if you're using GPS as well, you can use your GPS to tag where the data collector is or the enumerator is at different points. And then when you're done, you see something like thank you, and then you submit. Okay. And then it comes, you can rename the form, and then you can now say save form and exit. Most times when you save the form, it does not automatically upload. What you can now finally do is go back to your send finalized form, which is what we have here, send finalized form. This is like your first interface on your Kobo Collect. So you say send finalized form, click on send, and then you can send. And then of course, you see this comes up, your form is sending, and then you have uploaded what you need to do. Okay, so we're done with this first part. Okay, I hope you can see the description now. Okay, so someone was asking, is ODK the same as Kobo Collect? So they do basically the same thing, but they are different as to their platform. So let me show you an example. Sorry, this is an example. This is ODK's platform, for instance, right? So you can get started, create a form. Like I mentioned, why I don't use it is because it's a paid platform. And then most times people that use it are organizations. And then this is ODK specifically. While this is Kobo, this is what Kobo looks like. They are quite similar, but then different in application. But then what now makes the difference is your tool or your Android device you use in collecting the data, which is this Kobo Collect or ODK Collect. So whatever you're doing, you can always copy the link of what you have, whether you use your ODK to design or use your Kobo to design. The same principle. What you just need to do is to put up the settings, your URL, your username, and your password. And then anybody that has that URL and password can be able to access the tool you designed using either ODK or Kobo. All right. I hope I've been able to answer that question. Miriam, yes. So I want to just quickly take a few reactions or questions so that we can move on to the other part of our conversations this evening. So any question, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Isaac. I'm not sure we'll be able to move. I don't know what you mean by the other part of
okay.
discussion.
So
because with time is of the essence, we usually don't want to go beyond 1.5 hours. That's 90 minutes for retention. So I would just appreciate at this point if we take more comments and questions from people. But while they are trying to relax to take questions, let me just add that the Kobo Collect that Isaac mentioned said is free. It's actually not absolutely free because you will see the URL that it says Kobo Collect Humanitarian Response. So some people are paid to get that available, just like you have open access publication. Some people, organizations must have paid for publication. So that's the reason why you have that. So I will expect us to explore that. More importantly, that is not, you don't have to pay in essence.
Yes.
Again, I think this will have been more interactive if we had a physical meeting. I'm proposing that by God's grace, by next year, we have a boot camp and where we can have 1 week training hands-on on things like this. I think it's something that you will need. So if you would like to have that, just let us know and we aggregate and we can probably look for sponsors to do that because it will not come free. But it can land on your table free, but maybe if some organizations are able to pick that up is something we can try. We had something like this earlier in the year where we had a professor from Portugal also speaking to us on research. So research is an area that is almost inexhaustible, it's like a natural resource. So we'll try to help everybody to understand how to do research, and more importantly, research that delivers on products, things that you can handle. Okay. So thank you very much, Isaac. I just want us to take some questions at this point, and while Isaac will respond to them. Isaac, just check the chat buttons and let's see if we can, if you can pick some questions in the next 5 to 10 minutes before we wrap up.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad that Miriam was clear, and of course, I had hoped that we'll be able to go a little deeper into some other quantitative data analysis methods using specifically Excel and SPSS. And as you can see, I came in quite ready. I designed the slides and I was ready to go all out. But I know that time is of the essence. And if we're going to stay, it might take another 2-3 hours for us to complete this, So, but then again, of course, I'm open to whatever you may need, whether questions or maybe just some form of help to help you achieve, especially for those of us who are part of this mentorship program. I think I can do that for you free as my CSR. Okay, so yes, I think Boluaga can help us organize that. And we can always work around that. And that's one thing I will gladly do for those of us that are mentees in the program. Yeah, so it's again open. If you have any questions, we can just ask so we can clarify. Okay, you're welcome. I don't think anybody has any question. Dr. Sai, I don't know.
Hello, please, I have a question.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, my question is actually on the instruments, because I remembered when I was carrying out my research work, I had a lot of difficulty on that, because I actually went to the field with the mind that I will not be given relevant information about what I was actually working on. So there are some questions that I developed, then on getting to the field, it became something else. I almost messed the whole thing up. So I will need more clarification on that, on how to, ask the right question to the target audience. And at the same time, people are very funny when it actually deals with something that has got to do with the nation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ma. Let me just take that quickly. Again, in trying to design our tools, one thing, the tool designing is not one thing I also enjoy, because again, you want to be as careful as possible and as exhaustive as possible, such that you're not missing out anything. And then sometimes eventually becomes either too many, the questions become either too many or too few. And those are some of the things you're trying to avoid. However, one way you cannot go wrong in trying to design your tools is to rely on existing literatures or possibly existing studies in very similar to what you're doing. That's for those of us in the academics. We must just rely basically on our literature reviews in trying to put our questions together. And then for those of us in the development space, one thing we want to rely majorly on, if you're either doing a monitoring or you're evaluating a project, is your baseline. Either your baseline or your logical framework where you have your indicators and the rest of them. However, to also answer your question, having gone through your literatures and then seeing similar studies, and you're trying to be sure that your questions are in place, another thing you want to do is your testing, your pilot testing. What pilot testing helps you do really is to even help you understand the comprehension, the level of comprehension of the respondents, if they really would be able to understand the question. You know, of course, those are some of the things you could do facing your laptop and doing it. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is like cooking food. You know, the food is not for you, it's for the, you know, those that will eat it. You have to be sure that that food is tasty enough. And, you know, you would now have somebody in your kitchen alongside, oh, yeah, taste this soup and see if it's sweet. And if the person tastes it and say, oh, no, it's not sweet, okay. Because you have an end target in mind, you want to be sure that that person that is tasting it is well satisfied and does not have a problem. That's what we do in piloting. In piloting, you're trying to be sure that the questions are not difficult, they are easy to answer, and then they would be able to answer sincerely. Of course, we cannot rule out the place of you know, the human mind, either in trying to evade questions or just, you know, all those things. But then as much as possible, piloting just helps you make sure that the questions are watertight so that there will be little or no room for error. Yes. I hope that helped, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Any other, so we could just wrap up. Yes, I think the audio recording will be available. I think Bolu can help us sort that. For that, yes. Okay, I don't think we have any further question. So in the absence of any, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity, and I am also open to also help out in cases of any challenge, so we could just, you know, leave no one behind in trying to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you so much, Doctor, for the opportunity as well. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Isaac. It's been an elaborate discussion, teaching so far, and unfortunately, time will not allow us go further. But like you said, we'll try as much as possible to follow up from where you stopped today, so that we'll have an holistic training as per data analysis. Once again, I want to thank everybody for making our time to be a part of this month's seminar. Of course, it's meant to be an in-house thing for the fellows of the African Graduate Mentorship and Coaching Program, but we felt it's not good to leave anyone behind, like Isaac said, so we decided to open it to as many who are interested. I hope and I believe it has been value for your time. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.